I'm here with Tony Hughes, the Research Director for the New Zealand AIDS Foundation. Welcome, Tony. So, Tony, what happened with the HIV epidemic amongst gay and bisexual men over the past year?
Well, in the last year it's gone up compared to previous years. This is standard process in the epidemic in New Zealand. We reached a high point in 1989 first, and then it dropped away to 97 to 2000 when we had really low numbers, and then from 2001 it started rising again. In 2008 the numbers were the highest we've ever had, but only by one more than in 2005. You'll see the blue bars on the graph are infections which actually occurred in New Zealand, so the result of transmission that actually occurred here. So they're not infections that have come from overseas. So these are gay and bi men who've caught HIV here in New Zealand. And what you can see is those numbers too have gone up from 2000 to 2008. They're about 3 times the number in 2008. But that process of the numbers of new infections increasing is something that we've seen in virtually every country in the world since 2000, so it's not unique to New Zealand. Now, the other thing to say is that if you look at the overall number of new cases of HIV diagnosed in New Zealand over the last 5 years, over 80% of them are in gay and bisexual men.
So why is it that gay and bisexual men are figured so prominently in the HIV epidemic here in New Zealand and around the world?
Well, the first thing to say is around the world, no matter where you look, the rates of HIV infection in gay and bisexual men are the highest. And this is even true in Africa. Until recently we didn't have any data from Africa, so we didn't know what was going on amongst gay and bisexual men in Africa, but we now know that the rates are higher. So this is a universal feature, and of course the reason for it is sex, and in particular the particular sexual activities that transmit HIV. The most important thing to understand about HIV, it's not an easy virus to transmit from one person to another. So the different sexual activities have completely different likelihoods of passing HIV on. And if you look at the second graph that you've got there, what you see is on the vertical axis a range of different sexual activities that gay men engage in, and on the horizontal axis the amount of risk that's entailed in those. And the largest risk is the big red bar that goes across the bottom, which is receptive anal sex, which is far, far riskier than any other sexual activity. And the second highest risk is insertive anal sex, and that's the second red bar. And if people use condoms for insertive and of course receptive anal sex, because they involve doing both things, of course. If you use condoms for receptive and insertive anal sex, you remove about 95% of your sexual risk.
So can you explain to me how you would visualise to somebody the spread of HIV?
Yeah, I think people should think about it in the same way as they think about going on the net and going into a chat room and actually talking to somebody, rather than thinking about sex in the way people often do, which is with their immediate sexual partner and kind of a one-on-one activity or whatever. Think about it as a much more complicated web connection of sexual interconnections, and that's the way to look at it. I mean, we essentially, when we have sex with the partner, and we are actually having sex in terms of HIV risk with all the partners they have previously had. The third graphic that you've got there, which is from the Terence Higgins Trust, I think is really useful. And the guy says, how many people have you had sex with? And the partner says 1. And what then follows is the number of people that person has had sex with previously. So you start to understand that it's a network, that it's a whole series of sexual interconnections like the web, and they're extended in time, and that's how epidemics work. So the decision that someone makes as to whether or not they'll use a condom for anal sex with their partner right now, sure, it protects them and it protects their partner, but it also has a major impact on the future of the epidemic.
Tony, thank you so much. That's been really great. Just before you go, can you tell me what the 3 most important things for gay and bisexual men are that they need to understand about HIV?
Sure, I mean, I think that's easy. The first thing is that anal sex is by far the highest risk activity. 95% of the sexual risk that gay and bisexual men run comes from anal sex. The second thing is that we have a very effective way to reduce that risk for sexually active men who have sex with men, and that's using condoms, and that means consistently and properly. Doesn't mean some of the time, it means consistently and properly. And if people do that, they can expect to reduce their risk of acquiring HIV by around about 95% again. The third point that people have to remember is that the decision as to whether you use condoms with a partner is much more than just the act of protecting yourself and protecting him right then and there. It's also a major contribution to our ability to manage the ongoing spread of the epidemic. If everyone uses condoms, the epidemic will go down. If everyone doesn't, it will go up. It's as simple as that.